All right, glasses off. Hi, everybody. It's chapter 8 time, and this is the Monday video for Monday, the 30th of March, 2020. Hope everybody's doing well. We are up to 1967. We talked about the Summer of Love, and that was the summer of 67. It was also the summer when psychedelia really took over, became much more mainstream, both in terms of music, but also in terms of drugs, frankly, in terms of lifestyle. And this was all going on in the shadow of or in parallel to the Vietnam conflict, the Vietnam War, which was um, the overriding issue of the day. So you have this peace movement. Basically, you have this younger generation who's doing drugs and listening to rock and roll and saying peace, man. And you have an older generation who's saying, look, why don't you go fight for your country, what you're supposed to do? And the generations are just pulling further and further and further and further apart. One of the things that starts to happen during this time is there's a rise in cultism, frankly. There's a rise in people kind of creating their own families, living in communes. And this would come to be a thing in the culture of American youth from the late 60s, quite frankly, through the mid 70s into the late 70s, even, but definitely from about 68 to 73. The idea of living in families comprised of people that you meet wherever, that was actually quite a thing. Um, so if we get into the music that we're going to listen to, the first song, and this is where it just frustrates me that I can't play this stuff for you. I can play it for myself, but I'll pause while we listen to, frankly, one of the great songs ever recorded, um, A Whiter Shade of Pale by the British band Procol Harum. They did some great music, and A Whiter Shade of Pale was actually tied with Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, a song I expect most of you know. It tied as the greatest song produced in England in like the first 25 years of the rock era. It was something like that. Anyway, doesn't really matter. I'm not going to ask you that, but it's just to know that A Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum is one hell of a song. Give it a listen. Great song, great song. I hope you listen to the whole thing because it's really something. For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. Buffalo Springfield, another great band, and For What It's Worth is one of those classic songs that is you hear it and it automatically takes you right there to 1968. So it's been used in a lot of movies, which probably, and most of those movies have related to the Vietnam War or to that time period. So that certainly has something to do with the affiliation. Even so, it's a great song. For What It's Worth, Buffalo Field. There you go. For What It's Worth. I hope you listen to that whole thing too. Creedence Clearwater Revival next up. Creedence Clearwater Revival come to be known as CCR. And they were a band that played a style of music that would come to be called roots rock, would come to be called southern rock, would come to be called country rock, would come to be called swamp rock. Whatever it was a mix of certainly traditional sort of rock and roll with some very strong country influence. CCR would become one of those bands joined later by the likes of Lynyrd Skynyrd and 38 Special, the Allman Brothers, bands who played this kind of country rock and southern style rock would also be called. I don't know if I said that before. Anyway, CCR was one of the biggest American acts of the 1970s. They had a number of huge hit records. Fortunate Son, one of their early hits, um, that again is just one of those songs that, it's right there with 1968 with the Vietnam conflict. Fortunate Son, CCR. All right. I know you're not hearing the music, you're just seeing me sort of, so I'll stop. But it's a great song, Creedence. It's a great band. Okay, the next group on our list is a band called The Band. And The Band, um, they, in similar iterations, they had other names, but in 1966, they began touring with Bob Dylan, and they came to be known as The Band. They toured with him for a while, and then they spun off and started doing their own thing, recording their own albums. And The Band is extremely important in rock history. They were seen as hugely influential of other bands that would come after them. And they did, like CCR in a way, they did a mix of country and rock, but they also did um, soul music or rhythm and blues. It was this hybrid mashup of country, of rhythm and blues. It was distinctive, and it would come to influence a lot of bands that came around later in the 60s and in the 70s, and frankly in the 90s. So here's a little Up on Cripple Creek by The Band. All right, Up on Cripple Creek, The Band. Next song on our list, Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry. I include this record on our playlist because Ode to Billy Joe was a hugely popular record. It was number one for a month, but it wasn't just the song. It was a classic story song, Ode to Billy Joe. I mean, an ode is a story or a tale. And Ode to Billy Joe, it was just a great story song about this family sitting around and telling the story of this young man who had died and discovering there might be a closer connection to their family than they realized. The song wound up eliciting as many questions as it did providing answers. It would go on to be a TV movie, and there was great speculation as to what the song meant and represented and symbolized. I don't know. It was a huge hit record. Bobby Gentry would go on to be a country artist of some renown during the 1970s, but she never came close to duplicating the success of Ode to Billy Joe, one of the biggest hit records of the late 60s. Great story song, too. Sucks you right in. Oh, I'm doing it again, aren't I? You can't hear me, and I'm just bouncing along. It's a good tune. Listen to the song, all right? Listen to the song, for heaven's sake. Okay. The Doors. Great American band, one of the great bands in rock history. Band came out of LA. They would have a number of big hit records. They were famous for different things. One of the things with the Doors is they incorporated a lot of electric keyboards and organs into their songs. This had been done before, but it really became a signature part of the Doors sound. The other thing with the Doors, their lead singer was a guy named Jim Morrison, who became a superstar in his own right. He was irreverent and um, he was a lot of things, Jim Morrison. The one of the things that he was a victim of the Robert Johnson curse. Jim Morrison, along with Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, three of the great icons of 60s rock. He would pass Jim Morrison at the age of 27 in Paris, actually. Light My Fire, hit record. Listen to this organ at the beginning. All right, the Doors, and the Doors would be extremely important American band in rock history. Okay, I'm going to end this video here. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the greatest voice in rock and roll, and we're going to talk about what many people see as the greatest album in rock and roll. So I'll see you for round two. Back on the other side.